welcome back to the second ever Star Minigaming Battle Report. Of course, once again in Age of Sigmar, and this is, as you've possibly already seen in the kind of narrative bridge that I've done video to explain, we have the Vampiress Lord of mine over here on her zombie dragon, and her troops pursuing the Khorne Lord that she's faced before, who had attempted to conquer her city, her capital. They pursued them through the Realm Gate into the Realm of Fire to the burnt out remains of an old village and graveyard over here in Akshi. Now the point, I guess the objective for her is to continue on and to capture right here this blood altar of Khorne, right? Like it's this, you know, chaos construct that in here in the top basically is where the Khornate forces will have their blood sacrifices to open a portal into the realm of Khorne. And so we have our forces set on the table, and the Khorne forces, their objective is to protect this icon until the end of turn 6, at which reinforcements will arrive and they will be able to drive off the vampire's forces. So here is my forces that I began the game with. You'll notice not all of them are painted, but I am making progress. The Vampiress Lord Sinessa right here. I've done some more work on her base and on her. She's nearly completed. We still have my unpainted Mortis engine. I have 35 skeleton warriors who are all armed with shield and close combat weapon. And then we have my custom White King with the black axe. It's actually a Reaper Bones, I can't remember the exact one, Reaper Bones model that I converted. You'll see several of them in my force. I honestly like the fact that they're just so much cheaper and they have such a wide range of miniatures, and honestly the Reaper store is about 40 to 50 minutes away from my house in the city that I work at every day, and probably about 5 to 10 minutes from my workplace, so every now and again I stop by on the way home. Over here are my 3 Vargheists, which are what are they called? Something gargoyle. It's a named gargoyle that they make also in their Bones line, so they're about $2.50 to $3 American each, as opposed to the $30+ that the Vargheists normally come in, and personally I like these sculpts better. I have a Karen Wraith right here and 10 zombies. So not a huge force by any stretch of the imagination. They of course started out over by the graveyard. Clearly Sinessa has raised these zombies from the graveyard right here. The Vargheists and Karen Wraith are of course also quite at home in such a place. And here's the forces that we are arrayed against. There are 30 clan rats, 2 bloodstokers, 2 blood secrators, a group of blood reavers, a mighty lord of Khorne, 5 blood warriors, 2 Korgoraths, and of course a doom wheel. Now this game was played using the South Central GT comp. We both really like the SDK system, but seeing as that's not going to be updated or continued by the creator of it, understandably it's a lot of hard work and he doesn't get paid for it. We are shifting to another one that we've heard good things about, so that we kind of have a way to help us further build somewhat balanced forces to give us a little bit more of constructed style for playing. So in the first turn, Khorne won the priority, and they moved up. You'll see them in just a moment. They just moved up. Nothing really big happened. Of course, they don't have any summoning or anything. On my first turn, clearly Sinessa flew up over here. She summoned 20 more zombies because the Mortis Engine's +1 buff helps with that. And then she summoned a single one of these 2 right here, which they are 2 different Reaper models that I am also using as Karen Wraiths. They are, kind of ghostly Wraith-like figures that look like what I would imagine a Karen Wraith. And then the Necromancer that I forgot to mention, that I also had on the field, which is the Reaper model that you saw in the previous battle report, kind of a skeleton leash dude holding a little ball of flame. He summoned the other one. And real quickly before I get it further into this, you'll see things like the Mortis engine and the, this kind of skeleton leash that I have as a necromancer repeated in this, because characters that, or models that I kind of feel like are not something that are really the chaff, like the zombies or the skeletons, more of the kind of commander or more permanent units, I will keep them between each of the battle reports that are, narratively linked because they stuck around, right? And things that are more like the Vargheists and the Khorne Wraiths and the zombies that are more of the chaff that, you can, if you just let go of them from dominating them with Sinessa's power, then either they would cease to exist or they would just flee, because I imagine the Vargheists are quite feral, things like that. So the more permanent things like the Necromancer and the, and these other guys, they will stick around if they're a more permanent thing. If they're more of a, conjuration of Sinessa's own power or something that she's mentally dominated, they may not stick around between battles. That's just for your information and, kind of something I decided on and while we were constructing the forces for this battle. So here's a picture of the Khorne forces that had moved up. They won turn 1, like I said, and they just shifted everything forward a little bit to begin to move into a position to engage my forces in the town. And here's just another kind of close-up shot of them. Now, I hid the Mortis engine behind this house because, clearly they can't be seen by their opponent. For some reason, I've taken to it because the driver of this thing is blind. He has like a strip of cloth over his eyes, and these, kind of ghostly figures that drive it clearly aren't going to be that intelligent. I've kind of taken to making the Mortis engine have kind of a bungling, stupid personality that's kind of a bit of comic relief, and so whenever we play on the battlefield, I try to have that personified a bit in how I play the figure. So that's why he's hiding behind the house. On the next turn, I won priority, and everything else continued to move up. Sinessa summoned again 10 more zombies, and they kind of conga lined over here so they could join up with the 30 that were already here. I do own 60 zombies, but again, I haven't built the other 20, and so the 40 is the max, and I feel like that was a good number. My opponent does not have, in my opinion, the most optimized list when facing summoning, even if you're just talking with the factions that he likes playing. So I don't want to overdo it. That's why I also didn't bring an extra zombie dragon or anything like that. I wanted to keep the summoning kind of low level, only bringing in things that were, like a low level hero like a Khorne Wraith, or it's just chaff to tie things down. I don't really want to bring in the units that are going to just overpower and overwhelm, especially considering that we're both relatively new to Age of Sigmar, and I don't want to make the game unfun for my opponent, especially this early on. And in the narrative, I want it to, be somewhat competitive. So that was all that was brought in this turn. And like I said, everything kind of slowly moved up. And on his turn, everything for him continued to move up just a little bit further. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of difference in position. Everything's kind of going slowly, with the Traff being up in front to engage the things like my skeletons and all in combat. Here his Blood Reavers really moved up, and I really wanted to capture this shot because I love how the Blood Reavers look. I feel like they're in really good poses that whenever you have them kind of running around a building or between bits of terrain, that their poses and the way that they're styled really fits that kind of, you kind of can see the movement of the models a little bit more than other things, if that makes sense. This guy was having trouble standing up, so he was stuck in the little well, and I don't know, it was kind of his spot, which clearly it doesn't actually benefit them because they have a save of a dash, and which means they can never have any save. So then, after that, that was his movement, and then I won priority again and moved on up. Mortis engine flew right on into the middle because I was like, with the way his forces are arrayed, we're not going to get a whole lot better chance than probably next turn to do the Banshee Shriek and then the Shockwave ability. So that moved up. The Vargeist moved up so they could easily get within charge range. Sinessa moved over from her hill to begin to get in position. All of the skeletons continue to move up with their commander, the White Lord, and of course they're being followed and kept pace with this Necromancer, who I had every intention of pulling the combination that I mentioned in one of my Tactica videos on combining the +1 attack that the White Lord with the axe gives, and then the ability from the Necromancer for them to pile in and attack twice, so that every one of these skeletons could generate 8 attacks in one turn. But they literally never got to fight this battle. So I had my 2 Cairn Wraiths moved up to the front because with they have pretty good saves, and with their they ignore Rend, and they have the Reaped like Khorne ability, so that they get to reroll hits. They are pretty good against these cowardly little Skaven clan rats over here. So I had everything moved up. My zombies were moving up on this flank to engage these Korgoraths. If you saw the last video, I came to learn that zombies against Korgoraths is a very good way to pin down Korgoraths. Zombies being able to regenerate via the totem banner that they have, and then so summoners summoning in more zombies, and then they being able to join the squad, which is something unique to zombies, is really good for tying down Korgoraths, because every time a Korgorath is either kills them all or inflicts a wound, I can't remember which one. With 1 wound models, obviously there's no difference. They heal wounds, and so Korgoraths can be quite tough to kill, and especially in squads of multiple of them. And so having the replenishing ability of the zombies is definitely a good thing whenever you want to kind of tie them down and keep them busy. So I'd move them up to try to get them within charge range, but they failed this turn. The Vargeist, of course, easily made it in to charge against these Blood Reavers. I believe the Cairn Wraith made it as well. The Mortis Engine made it and charged into these Skaven in such a way that nothing else was going to be within pilot range. These 2 Cairn Wraiths also made it within charge range. Yep, as we can see here. And the zombies failed their charge. The combat phase definitely went my way. We had the Vargeist, which before I'd ever bought any models to play them, I wasn't particularly impressed by their stats. Not that they're terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but they just didn't look overly impressive. They are really good models, though. That's especially if you throw them against chaff. I completely forgot about one of their special rules in this combat phase, but they're a 3-up, 3-up, neg1 Rend for 2 damage, and they have 3 attacks each, except for their leader has 4. So the 3 of them make 10 attacks. Now against the Blood Reavers, having no saves whatsoever, with them barreling in, they just absolutely devastated them. And ordinarily, for every model that you kill, you get to, I believe it's for every model you kill, you get to generate an additional attack. Let me double check that real quick. But while I'm doing so, I'll continue to describe what happened in terms of the other parts of that battle. So this Cairn Wraith also ran up and joined them and did quite well because, again, he is a 2 damage attack with a neg1 Rend, which again is pointless against them because they have no save. But there was 6 models in the squad whenever he charged them. And so he got his Reap like Khorne special to where he's re-rolling on the to hit, which is a 4-up. So 4-up re-rollable, that's pretty significant compared to just 4-up. With the 3+ to wound, doing 2 damage each. So he took out a few more. And the, let's see, Vargeist. Okay. It says, roll a die each time a model from this unit slays an enemy model. On a 6, it can immediately make 1 extra attack. So I forgot about that. I should have rolled to generate additional attacks with the Vargeist. I didn't, but it didn't really matter. They had killed so much of this squad that the remaining ones were going to automatically flee. And then, of course, they did 2 wounds back onto the Vargeist, which I put on this guy who had jumped into the well to claim it for himself. It was kind of funny because we had put the 1 Blood Reaver that couldn't really stand up and the 1 Vargeist that struggled to stand up into the well to fight each other. We're like, it's the 2 kind of drunken guys. having their drunken brawl, and they both kept falling over as we were trying to have this fight. So it was a very unimpressive combat. And then down here we had the Mortis Engine and these two Khorne Wraiths. The Mortis Engine, I think, killed 3 guys this turn, and the Khorne Wraiths each killed, I believe, 4. So clearly, that's enough to generate their tests. So, whenever they took their test up here, the last of the Blood Reavers ran away, and then some more Skaven ran away because, they failed their test. So then the next turn, my opponent won priority, and that's just a couple shots. I guess I forgot to take pictures, or did I win priority? I believe I won priority next, actually. So on the next turn, I moved. Let's flip back. There we go. I moved Sinessa up. Well, first I moved up the Vargheists, and I moved them into. Okay, yes, I won priority next turn. Okay, so what happened first was during the hero phase, this went off, and it had taken a couple of wounds from the Skaven the turn before. So its Shriek goes off, it hits the Warriors, it hits this dude, it hits the Skaven, and it hits the Doom Wheel. And all of them take a few wounds. Then I roll for the, the shockwave of death energy that it sends out, and it inflicted even more wounds. So by the end of it, there were 3 Blood Warriors left. One of them had taken a wound. This guy completely died to the 2 things. This Blood Reaver took a little bit of damage. I'm sorry, not Blood Reaver. Blood Secretor took a little bit of damage. This Mighty Lord of Khorne took a little bit of damage. And the other Blood Stoker right here had also taken a little bit of damage. Doomwheel took some damage. Basically, the Khorgrass took some damage. Everything but this Blood Secretor back here took damage. And so on the next turn, these Vargheists moved up to here, and this Khorne Wraith moved up over here to help engage these Skaven. And I moved Sinessa up into this well. She had cast a Mystic Shield on herself, and she tried to use the Zombie Dragon's Pestilence Breath, and it failed. I failed to roll the 4 up to hit the Mighty Lord of Khorne, who was down to 4 wounds. This Blood Secretor was down to 2, and the Blood Stoker, I believe, was down to 3. Or those 2 may have been flipped, but anyways, there was about 9 wounds left between the 3 of them, and I had her parked over here within relatively easy charge range, and I was really kind of considering, should I charge? And I opted to. So I, moved in and attacked them, and killed all 3 of them in the first, attack of the combat phase. With her Death Lance, I charged in and just annihilated the Mighty Lord of Khorne. With the Rend and the fact that it's 3 damage on the charge with each of its, 3 strikes that it's making, it was not that difficult to inflict the final wounds on him. Then I attacked with the, I believe it's the Maw is next on the list of attacks, and I used that on the Secretor, and that killed him quite easily. And then I used of course, the claws of the Zombie Dragon and killed the Blood Stoker. Just killed them all before they even had a chance to strike back. And the rest of the combat phase, apologies for the, blurry picture right there, very much went my way. These Vargheists had been healed by the shockwave of this Mortis Engine, and when they were charging at full health, they wiped out the remaining 3 Blood Warriors and took like 1 wound back from a Gore Fist. The rest of these Skaven were annihilated by the combined 3 Khorne Wraiths and the Mortis Engine. The zombies did manage to finally charge the Khorgraths and began their long drawn-out combat with them. And so the Doom Wheel moved in to try to kill the Mortis Engine, because even though it was apparent to my opponent that, this battle was probably lost, if he could kill the Mortis Engine, I wasn't going to bring it in the next game, so that became kind of a secondary objective for him. which he tried to do. My skeletons were all just kind of tripping over themselves here. They weren't doing anything in the game. They clearly weren't going to, so whenever I was moving them, I was just kind of pushing them as a horde. So they were kind of like falling down, because they were worthless to me in the game, so I was kind of characterizing that in the way I was playing them. Here's my opponent's dead pile from like the past turn or so. And so the battle continued for a little bit. Again, I must have forgotten to take a couple pictures. The zombies kind of traded blows with the 2 Khorgoraths. This is dead. He's not actually left on the battlefield. This big group of 40 zombies. And they also killed the Blood Secrator that was left there in the back corner. And on the beginning of turn 6, which I wiped him out in that turn, I moved Sinessa up to the Chaos artifact, and so she could destroy it and claim the field. And so at the end of the game, this is basically what was left on the battlefield for me. I had my two remaining Khorne Wraiths. One of them did die at the end to the Doom Wheel over here. They kind of came over and decided they were going to haunt this house. That was going to be where they took up residence. The skeletons finally all stood up in nice semi-orderly fashion because their lord demanded it of him, and the necromancer with him kind of gave him a little bit of encouragement. The zombies had taken some hits, and they were beginning to be depleted from their 40. They got all the way down to about 30 of them left, and I believe they actually got down to about 27. And then as she flew by, Sinessa just summoned more of them into that squad to finish off the last of the 2 Khorgoraths. In a 2-turn period, they managed to finally kill them all off at the end in turns 5 and 6. And then at the bottom of turn 5 and top of turn 6. And then, of course, they also managed to mob and kill the final Blood Secrator for a very much major victory for Sinessa and her personal forces of death. This is, of course, the remaining zombies. So in the end, the only things that ended up being summoned onto the table were the 30 zombies, which is a significant amount, and then there were 10 that were resummoned. So in the totality, and of course the 2 Khorne Wraiths on the totality of the game, there was probably about 40 zombies summoned into the 2 Khorne Wraiths, which is a significant amount. Looking back on it in terms of, do I think that swung the battle one way or the other, in terms of, some people always seem to think that summoning is vastly overpowered, which it, of course, can be if you abuse it, especially if you're going up against a force that's not well equipped to prevent you from continuing to summon. There's nothing in my opponent's force that is particularly fast. The 2 realm gates that we have on the battlefield over here and over here, we weren't playing with them acting as realm gates. They were purely there for aesthetic and narrative purposes. So he had no way to quickly redeploy across the battlefield. I only had the 2 units that could summon, but obviously I could have abused it. So, going up against a force that's not really designed to counter summoning. They don't have summoning of their own. They don't have spellcasters. They don't have, quick units that can really get behind the enemy's line and take care of the summoners without any real way of taking care of summoning units. Summoning can be vastly overpowered if you abuse it. Do I think that the models that I summoned were enough to unbalance the game or lean it heavily in my favor? No. Honestly, I feel like the dice rolls were vastly in my favor in this game. Statistically, maybe my units had better chances of wounding and all, but between the turn that my Mortis engine went off and, kind of did both things, and then Sinessa charging in and killing basically the top 3 commanders of my opponent's army in one turn without taking a scratch herself, that those 2 things I think alone were enough to, ensure victory for my forces. And of course having the 35 skeleton warriors and the White King that never even got to fight, which I kept buffing them, getting them prepared for combat every turn, but they always failed their charge or were never charged by the opponent. I think that had I summoned in nothing, that the weight of combat that they would have brought in, that as opposed to the 30 zombies and the 2 Hex or Khorne Wraiths that I summoned in, I think that they would have done even more. So I don't think that the summoning played a significant part in terms of winning or losing the battle. But for narrative purposes, Sinessa is victorious. She has claimed this area. The Khorne 8 forces are scattered and in retreat. The Skaven allies of theirs, of course, have also been crushed under their heels and are also in retreat. And this particular Lord of Khorne is going to need to appeal to Khorne for some help before next time. So that's going to be the end of this battle report. We will continue the narrative campaign. We're hoping to get another battle in, not this weekend, but the next. So hopefully we'll have the next battle report out by then. It may take a little bit longer. We'll see. You know, schedules and life sometimes get in the way. But stay tuned for more of this Vampiress Lord Sinessa and her rise to glory. Until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.